point margin. We go down to the last day of the season to settle the 2021 crown, the 21st of November, the latest ever title decider. Lights out on race 1. Not a good start at all from Scott Redding. Rays away superbly. Garrett Gerloff comes through on top rack. Razgatlioglu. Andrea Locatelli comes through on the inside of Razgatlioglu. Redding recovering to the inside line. Top rack pushed back to third. It's Ray who leads early on. Gerloff loses out in the initial skirmish. Tom Sykes forcing his way through very nicely indeed. Remember, from 6th position on the grid, he's already up to 4th. Gerloff a little tentative. Bassani comes through as well. Bautista also making progress. Rinaldi with a really strong start. All the way down in 14th position he started this race. He's already up inside the top 10. Mercado just losing a spot as Rinaldi comes through on him. Further progress now being made by Michael Ruben Rinaldi. It looks like he's got through on Bautista and Gerloff already, so he's gained all the way up from 14th on the grid to 7th position just in the early stages. Top rack finding his feet at the front of the field. It's Jonathan Ray who's burst from the line. Ideal situation for the number 1. He's got a buffer in Scott Redding between himself and Razgatlioglu, but not for much longer. Redding tipping in there a little late, and Top rack gets through, and Tom Sykes right on the pace and right on the case of this top 3.
Yeah, Sykes with that X tyre really strong in the opening lap, coming through from 6th on the grid. We saw Gerloff make a good start in the run down in towards turn 1, lose a lot of ground. Top rack got off the line a little bit slowly. He's come up to speed pretty quickly here on lap 1, though, up into 2nd spot.
Very early days to be talking about the championship given these conditions, as Tom Sykes sides through on Scott Redding. Redding, though, on the switchback will have the inside line as they make their way off turns 13 and 14 up towards the longest braking area on this circuit, in towards the slowest corner on this 4.3 kilometre track, and in towards turn 16. Jonathan Ray beginning to have to defend now. Same for Scott Redding behind him, who's been well and truly dropped by Top rack Razgatlioglu. Now remember, in the context of the championship, Top rack only needs 2nd place in order to seal this title, but he's not one for settling for 2nd. He's going to be a racer to the last. Top rack at the start of lap 2 thinks about a move on Jonathan Ray. Whatever you do, don't collect the back of him. Ray holds firm. Less than 1/10 of a second between them, though, at the end of lap number 1.
Yeah, Top rack's looking pretty good there, trying to make a run on the run into towards turn 1. He looks comfortable at this stage. It's in the second half of the lap, though. That's where it really is in the damper conditions, so we'll wait and see what it's like on the run into towards turn 10. But Top rack doing a good job at this stage, keeping a watching brief there. Big cross, that could be Connick at the start of the lap.
Very spectacularly indeed, and his inexperience telling there. He'd worked his way up quite nicely into 15th position at the time of going down as well, so a shame for Oliver Koenig, but it just goes to show that the top men, the experienced men, are able to make the difference in these conditions, and that's exactly what Top rack Razgatlioglu is trying to do here, hassling and harrying Jonathan Ray into the braking zones. Lap 2 of 20, this is going to feel like the longest race ever for those two.
Yeah, this is going to feel like they're tiptoeing around, really riding on their fingertips, and what's interesting is you can see for Top rack there, he looks like he's got that little bit of extra pace right now, a little bit more confidence than Jonathan Ray. Just looking at the riders as well, looks like they're all still out there in full dry configuration for themselves. Doesn't look like anyone's out there on wet weather knee sliders to give them that little bit more of a chance to be able to have that stability. So everyone's still out there trying to do what they can in these damper sections. Even that little advantage could have made a big difference. You can see for Bassani, though, really confident on Tom Sykes in the run down in towards turn 15.
Axel Bassani, who's already been the star of the show in damp conditions earlier on this campaign in Barcelona, cutting his way through the field once again. Michael Ruben Rinaldi, after a strong start to this race, has dropped back outside the top 10. The start of lap 3. Razgatlioglu has been close each lap around at the end of this 507-metre start-finish straight. Finally, he gets it done. Jonathan Ray turns into turn 1, but he can't get there. Top rack's already through, and Razgatlioglu hits the front in race 1.
Yeah, Top rack wants to win the championship in style. He said all the way through this season, win races, the championship takes care of itself. He's willing to take the risks here in these conditions. Obviously on the run down in towards turn 1, that's where there is a bit of grip. You can see that the riders are able to take a pretty traditional line through that section of the track. It's all the way up towards turn 10. That's where it is getting a little bit dicey out there, but we saw from Top rack, he was also willing to push a little bit into turn 10, get close to Jonathan Ray in the previous lap, so it's just going to be a case of now how hard is Ray willing to push.
Well, we know that Jonathan Ray is not going to pull his punches. He does so, though, in towards turn 10.
Yeah, you can see there for Top rack as we rode on board that he's still having a little bit of an endo on the run into turn 10, so he's still braking really hard. The pace isn't hot in this lead group, though. You can see that Tom Sykes in 5th position, he's closed right up, so we've got 5 riders all closely matched. Spots of rain on the camera once again down there at turn 12.
Bassani at the moment is the fastest man out there. Axel Bassani, who now cuts through on Scott Redding, set at 1 minute 39.474. That was half a second exactly faster than Scott Redding on the previous lap, so a change in the order among the two Ducatis, but Bassani could really put himself in the mix here with Razgatlioglu and Ray. It was Scott Redding who had a 1 second deficit to the top 2. He gained all of that ground on this lap around, got it down to 0.2 of a second. Bassani now is making this a 5-rider train because Tom Sykes is still in there. 1.5 seconds covering your lead lead quintet. Ray with an opportunity perhaps into turn number one. We know how good Razgatlioglu is on the brakes, but we also know that Jonathan Ray is going to be desperately keen in this season finale. Toprak still leads, Ray second, Bassani third, Redding fourth, Sykes in fifth.
Yeah, and Sykes' teammate Michael Vandermark, the fastest man at the track last time around, he was a full second faster than Toprak Razgatlioglu out in the lead. He's bringing Andrea Locatelli with him as well. We could have 7 riders in this lead group very quickly.
Michael Vandermark, the winner of the Tissot Superpole race earlier on in the season at the Portuguese round. A new fastest lap of the race at 1:38.295. Just a second covered the lead quintet over the line at the end of lap number 3. But it was Vandermark behind them who was the fastest man on the circuit. We ride on board now with Jonathan Ray. Nothing to choose between himself and Razgatlioglu as they come again in towards turn number 10. Bassani a little bit wide. He's going to get a better exit than the 2 riders now in front of him. It's a chicane 11 and 12. Difficult to make a pass through there. Redding getting back on terms, and they are so bunched up now. Look at Bassani having a go at Jonathan Ray as they come in towards turn 12, and Ray is bumped completely out of position. He wasn't expecting that whatsoever from Axel Bassani, and this is dreamland now for Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, Toprak out in front. He's going to come under pressure from Bassani. Bassani does look like he's just willing to push that little bit harder than some of the other leaders, but look at Vandermark on the number 60 machine, the orange helmet at the back of this group. He's dropped Andrea Locatelli. He's jumped straight onto the back of Tom Sykes. We'll see if he's able to make some moves in the next couple of corners.
Axel Bassani, who remember was a runner-up in race 1 of the Catalunya round, the 9th round of this 2021 campaign, who mastered difficult track conditions and rubbed shoulders with the likes of Razgatlioglu and Ray for the first time. Toprak went on to suffer a mechanical failure, didn't get the kind of result that he might have hoped for over the course of that weekend. Lap 5 of 20 gets underway. Razgatlioglu, quarter of a second of daylight behind him now to Bassani, but Bassani was over a tenth of a second faster on lap 4. Ray being dropped off half a second now to Toprak, the race leader. Redding still with them. Sykes half a second behind that lead quartet. A bit of a gap opening up to the 2 BMWs, P5 and P6. Michael Vandermark, Locatelli, Bautista and Chaz Davies rounding out your top 9. And Davies the fastest of all of them last time around.
Yeah, Davies 3 seconds behind the race leader. We'll see if he's able to bridge some of that gap. He needs to get through on Alvaro Bautista and Andrea Locatelli. You can see he's right there with Bautista. Only a matter of time before Davis on the number 7 gets through.
And here goes Axel Bassani on Toprak Razgatlioglu, turn 10 of lap 5. And Bassani has fought his way through the field quite superbly from 7th on the grid. One single podium finish to his name. Remember back to those damp conditions in the Catalunya round earlier on in this season. Think back to the triple header. Bassani leads here at the Mandalika International Circuit.
And Jonathan Ray knows he needs to pounce on Toprak at this stage so that he can go with Axel Bassani at the front of the field.
And Jonathan Ray does copy Axel Bassani's aggression as he fights his way through on Toprak Razgatlioglu for second position through turns 13 and 14. Razgatlioglu pushed down to third then, hasn't found himself this far back in this race so far. We're only a quarter of the way through, and Ray now wants to hit the front. Oh, he moves Bassani out of the way. No quarter given there whatsoever by Jonathan Ray, and he's got exactly now what he needs. A buffer between himself and Razgatlioglu. Bassani working wonders for the current race leader, the new race leader, Jonathan Ray. New fastest lap of the race last time around from Ray, a 1:37.418. Razgatlioglu now will be aggressive on Bassani. Knows it's a top 2 finish he needs from this race in order to confirm himself as world champion. He puts himself back into a title winning position.
Yeah, we've said all the way through this weekend, it looks like in the dry conditions, Toprak would have had a few Yamahas up there with him. In these damp conditions, he doesn't have any help. Andrea Locatelli in 7th spot, and then Garrett Gerloff 13th, and Coda Nozani down in 16th. So none of those riders able to offer him any sort of help at this stage. It's all down to Toprak. He knew that he needed to follow through on Axel Bassani there, because he knows second place behind Jonathan Ray is enough to clinch the championship.
Michael Vandermark matching the pace at the moment of Scott Redding as Razgatlioglu makes his move on Jonathan Ray. Bit of a wobble from the pair of them as they make their way in towards turn 10. Ray thinks he might have the line coming off that 10th turn, and towards turn 11 he does. Ray had the better pickup. Razgatlioglu was aggressive on his way in, but left the line open for Ray to pounce, and now Razgatlioglu has got Bassani and Redding tucked up all on the back of him. Half a second between the 4 of them at the end of the previous lap, and Bassani can't quite get it done on Razgatlioglu this time around in through turns 13 and 14.
Yeah, even with the change of the positions last time around, it was Ray that set the fastest lap. That's where we started to see this leading group stretch out. For Vandermark down in 6th, the winner in the damp conditions in Portimao in the Superpole race, he knows he needs to clear Sykes quickly, get himself up into 5th position, see if he's able to bridge the gap to the 2 Ducatis in front of him.
Michael Vandermark in 6th position, matching the pace of Bassani and Redding last time around. Significantly faster, a couple of tenths of a second faster than teammate Tom Sykes. So Vandermark aiming to clear the number number 66 and move up into 5th position. Back to the front, it's Ray who leads. Last time around it was Razgatlioglu who responded, and a new fastest lap of the race at 1:36.7.
The sun's come out, and in the last couple of minutes track temperature's gone up by a couple of degrees. Riders are starting to get faster and faster. 36.7 for Toprak last time around. That's the new fastest lap. That's about 2 seconds slower than some of the dry weather pace we've seen this weekend. Around about 3 seconds slower than the outright dry weather pace.
Now it's a question of whether the likes of Bassani and Redding can go with this top two, because if things stay as they are at present, if Ray and Razgatlioglu pull away from the pack, that works much better for Toprak than it does for Ray. I'm not sure that there'll be enough strategy there for Jonathan Ray to try and bottle up Razgatlioglu or to hold up this race, but if he wants to win the title, he might have to think in that kind of strategic fashion.
I think bottling up Toprak's going to be a real challenge, because Toprak has shown all the way through this season how aggressive he's willing to be on the racetrack, and if you bring that pace down to try and bring other riders into the battle, Toprak, with how aggressive he is, he might just try and make a move and force the issue.
Yes, Michael Vandermark directly behind, right on the tail now of Tom Sykes, just a tenth or so of a second in it for that 5th position, but quite rightly our focus on the leaders. A reminder, if Jonathan Ray beats Toprak Razgatlioglu for victory by a single position here, the gap would be 25 points between them. Jonathan Ray could not take the fight to the final race of this 2021 series. Big moment there for Bassani, defending 3rd position against Scott Redding, still only half a second covering that lead quartet.
Yeah, and the 4 leaders coming across the line. You see Jonathan Ray being given the encouragement there by his crew. New fastest lap of the race that time around for Jonathan Ray. Toprak just a tenth of a second slower, and that's why the leading 4 are stretching away from the BMWs of Sykes and Vandermark.
Ray looking particularly good through that final sector, it would appear.
Yeah, Jonathan looks really strong on the long run through turn 15, but as it is right now, it's just who's willing to push that little bit harder, who's willing to see where that grip is. Ray is the guinea pig, and we saw in Portimao that that didn't always work out too well for him.
The harder they push, the bigger the risk. Jonathan Ray has had plenty of incidents over the course of this season. Turning point of the campaign in Most. We've seen drama in Portimao, the circuit where he was expected to dominate, but he's getting off to a good start to what will be his first ever Indonesian round. Riding on board here with Toprak Razgatlioglu, you can see Ray is beginning to stretch the tiniest of margins, couple of tenths of a second the gap.
Yeah, and Ray just trying to edge himself away in that middle sector of the lap. As you said earlier on, Alex, really strong in that final sector. Toprak's going to have to try and just maintain that gap as it is. 2nd position is good enough for Toprak, but he wants to make sure he's able to stay with Ray. He wants to make sure that it's as safe a race as possible for him. As much as anything else, the safest way for that for Toprak is to race this naturally, try and stay at the front of the field, try and break away from Bassani and Redding.
Yes, exactly, that's the key. Break away from Bassani and Redding, well, particularly Bassani at the moment, because Redding has been dropped from the lead trio. He's half a second now behind Axel Bassani across the last timing point. Then there's a full second to Tom Sykes, although Sykes has made a few tenths on Redding this lap around, so Scott Redding seemingly struggling on lap 8 of 20. We come off the final turn to start lap 9. It's Jonathan Ray out in front, another new fastest lap of the race as the track conditions gradually improve. Razgatlioglu in the slipstream, not close enough this time around into turn 1, but he was less than a tenth of a second behind over the line. Nothing to choose between them all season, nothing to choose between them last lap either.
Yeah, and this might be the title deciding round, but certainly what we've seen all the way through this year is that these 2 riders so closely matched out on track all the way through this year. Pretty much every race we've seen them battling bar to bar. Looks like we're going to get the same here in Indonesia as well. Toprak, he looks like he's starting to push on a little bit. That's why Bassani's dropping that tenth of a second here, tenth of a second there, and that's opening up the gap between Razgatlioglu and 3rd.
But as it stands, Razgatlioglu doesn't need to take any risks trying to pass Jonathan Ray. He only needs to stay in front of Axel Bassani and Scott Redding, speed world champion, but he's taking risks anyway. They're going to touch. Surely they're going to touch. Just about. Jonathan Ray squeezes out of the way, and Toprak Razgatlioglu forces his way to the front on lap 9 of 20.
Jonathan Ray said on Friday, if you make a move into turn 10, you're not respecting your rival on the racetrack. And for Toprak there, he went in a little bit too deep. You saw that he had that endo on the run in towards turn 10. He was braking as hard as he could, and that wasn't a planned move. That was Toprak just adapting on the fly to that.
Now we know how strong Jonathan Ray is in through the final sector. Is there an opportunity for him to immediately respond? Surely that's going to be the key here for Jonathan Ray. Can't allow Razgatlioglu to escape at the head of the field. This is where Ray's been making up his time on his direct rival, but he's tucked in behind him. There's no way to get through in towards the bottleneck at turn 17. Might have to be a move in towards turn 1 at the start of lap 10 here. Razgatlioglu sees daylight in front of him, sees dark clouds above him, but is the race leader once again. Jonathan Ray ducks out of the slipstream in towards turn 1. Ray's going to be very aggressive here on Razgatlioglu. He's not close enough, and Toprak holds firm out in front.
Yeah, you're going to do well to outbreak Toprak in the run in towards turn 1. You can see with that though from Jonathan Ray that this isn't boxing, this is a barroom brawl. You've got to make sure that any opportunity you have, you just send it down the inside, see if you're able to make the moves. Ray not quite close enough on the run into turn 1, but you could see a little bit of a change for him there. He wanted to make sure he was in a position to try and attack, and we haven't always seen that through the course of this year in those types of corners from Ray.
Well, let's see how much respect Jonathan Ray has got for Toprak Razgatlioglu when we get in towards turn 10 here of lap number 10. He's very close to him coming off turn 9. Will Toprak be deep enough on the brakes? Yes, he will. Jonathan Ray can't find a way through a momentary twitch for the back tyre there of Toprak Razgatlioglu, the race leader. And all the while, these two are going to have to watch out for Scott Redding, who's closing in on them. New fastest lap of the race last time around, and a significant margin Redding made up as well. 1:35.461 compared to a 1:35.9 for Razgatlioglu and a 1:36.28 for Jonathan Ray. He's left Bassani behind him. Redding up in third position could be the man to throw a little extra bit of spice into this mix. Further back, Tom Sykes and Michael Vandermark have exchanged positions. Vandermark's through for fifth as Ray makes his pass. I said he's been strong through this final sector all race long. Razgatlioglu a little bit wide. Ray storms through and perfect block pass there through 15 and 16.
What's interesting as well, though, is over the course of this season, trail braking like that hasn't been the strength of the Kawasaki. So Ray's found something to be able to give himself that opportunity to make moves like that. Toprak into turn 1, though.
Turn 1 of lap 11. Razgatlioglu now will respond. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining World SBK, this is what we've been treated to all season long.
Yeah, this is why these are two of the best riders in the world this year. Very hard to choose anything between them. Toprak hasn't put a foot wrong out in the racetrack. He's racing this title deciding weekend the same way he's done all the way through this season, trying to win it from the front.
Ray a bit hot into 2 and 3, runs wide but manages to gather it up through the rest of the first sector. Ray right out onto the paint, sliding across the white line and across the red and white curves as he makes his way back onto the tail of Razgatlioglu. Watch for Redding as well, closing in and spoiling for a fight. Ray goes to the outside of Razgatlioglu. Redding here with an opportunity to mix it with the pair of them.
What's interesting with Ray is his natural line through turn 10 is a little bit tighter than Toprak's. He's trying to just make sure he's got that drive and he's on the gas a little bit earlier to set up the end of this lap.
Well, at the moment it looks like this race, let alone this championship, is going down to the wire. Toprak doing everything he needs to. Race victory, of course, will be comfortably enough. Second place would also be good enough. The best way Jonathan Ray can stop Toprak Razgatlioglu is by beating him, or perhaps more to the point, beating him up.
Yeah, and that's going to be the only option for Ray down in towards turn 15. He's going to try and do the same move again. You can see just how much grip he has on that run through turn 13. He exits that corner very strong. Toprak's learned a bit of a lesson, though, in the previous couple of laps.
And here goes Redding. Scott Redding down the inside of Jonathan Ray through 15 and 16, and that's exactly what Jonathan Ray wouldn't have been wanting to see through the final sector, where he's generally been making progress on Razgatlioglu, and suddenly Toprak is able to make a bit of a gap, a third of a second to Scott Redding over the line, half a second now to Jonathan Ray. That final sector of that last lap, bad news for Ray.
Yeah, Ray got beaten up, lost 4/10 of a second in that final sector. We'll see if he's able to bridge that gap pretty quickly back up to Scott Redding, but we've seen it at times through this season, when Scott Redding and that Ducati is in the right operating window, it's the fastest bike out in the racetrack, and right now Scott does look like he's got a lot more bike underneath him than those other riders in that group.
Quick word as well for Axel Bassani, still less than a second away from the race lead. Sensational performance it's been from him. And remember, in the battle of the top independent, Garrett Gerloff all the way down in 13th position. So this would be big progress for Bassani, who stands to make up 10 of the 14 points by which he currently trails Gerloff. Back to the front of the field, Razgatlioglu backing it in as ever in towards turn 10. Ray closing back down Redding, but it's not good news for him at the moment. If the roles were reversed, he'd be a little bit happier than he would be at present.
Yeah, it does look like for Jonathan Ray, he is strong through turn 10 because he breaks that little bit earlier than the other riders. He's able to open the gas a little bit earlier, so he exits the corner very well. But you can see for Scott Redding, he's opened that gap to Jonathan Ray in the last couple of corners. He's really finding his confidence at this stage, and we know that Scott Redding in these changeable conditions has been quite good in the past. Think back to his Grand Prix career, he was able to pick up podiums in MotoGP in changeable conditions.
Wide, very wide for Toprak Razgatlioglu. He's off the circuit altogether into turn 15. He's picked off by Jonathan Ray. Scott Redding is your new race leader. Bassani fancies an opportunity to get back into provisional podium contention, and that just goes to show you the perils of a drying circuit. It's not fully dry just yet. Redding over the line for a new fastest lap of the race at 1:34.8, but that's two big scares now for Toprak Razgatlioglu on the initial warm-up lap before race 1 and on lap 12 of 20. He wants to bring it home now for this title.
Yeah, the one thing for Toprak is he knows finishing third is good enough as long as Jonathan Ray doesn't win the race, but Ray will have seen that mistake for Toprak. That would have given him a lot more confidence to try and push on, close that gap onto Scott Redding. You can see just a bobble there for Toprak as he came through. He's trying to get that bike stopped all the way, still sliding even on that trail brake all the way into the curb, and able to stand the bike up eventually and get it stopped. Has a quick look over his shoulder to see where Bassani is, but that's certainly been the big wake-up call. We've got the Yamaha pit box just underneath our commentary box here, and certainly that would have given them a few increases in the heart rate.
Yes, I can't see through the floor, but I can imagine what the reaction was. Razgatlioglu looks to be struggling at this stage of the race. Lap 13, Bassani hassling and harrying him. Razgatlioglu now 1.3 seconds behind Jonathan Ray, who sits in second position. Scott Redding is your race leader. As we've said, second position would not be enough for Jonathan Ray, even with Toprak Razgatlioglu behind him. So Ray is going to push as hard as he can here to chase down and pass Scott Redding.
Yeah, and you can see on this lap already he's pulled back a few tenths of a second, and it was in this last sector he lost a bit of ground last time around. You can see just different lines between the Kawasaki and the Ducati, but Jonathan Ray on this lap, he's bridged that half-second gap. He's right there. He's got his tail up. He knows that he's got the opportunity to win this race. Put a bit of pressure on Toprak.
Wily old campaigner, the master, who's had good fortune when he's needed it down the years. KRT encouraging him on. Vamos, they say, as he heads into lap 14 of 20. A new fastest lap of the race, a 1:34.413. Just over a tenth of a second now, the gap to Scott Redding. Behind, Toprak Razgatlioglu has consolidated, has stabilised his pace. He's 1.6 back from Ray, and I think he might just be about to join the Scott Redding fan club.
Yeah, he's just after setting his fastest lap of the race as well. So Toprak on his first clear lap after that mistake, he's pushing on as well. The only problem for him is Jonathan Ray was 8 tenths of a second faster than him last time around.
Yes, at the moment it's all about Ducatis. Scott Redding, can he stay in front of Jonathan Ray? Axel Bassani, can he pass Toprak Razgatlioglu to keep this title fight alive? Less than a bike length in it as they come off turns 8 and 9. Ray with an opportunity in towards turn 10. Redding and Ray with different lines at one of the pinch points of this circuit, at one of the action hotspots, little doubt about that. Ray, as has customarily been the case during this race one, has got the better drive off turn 10, but it's too short a squirt into 11, and Ray has to give second best for the moment on lap 14.
Yeah, we know that Jonathan Ray, the next couple of corners, is very fast on the run down in towards turn 15. We'll see if he's able to get close enough to Scott Redding to try and make a move down into there. The gap between Ray and Razgatlioglu stretched out to 1.2 seconds.
Well, I would say stretched out. I would say it's more closed in, because Toprak has gained 4 tenths of a second on Jonathan Ray on this lap so far. New personal best sectors coming in from Toprak Razgatlioglu, and a new fastest sector of anyone through sector 3. So Toprak is growing in confidence, and if Ray gets bottled up for too long behind Redding, then we know that it is going to be a situation where Toprak will be the man who is the most of the menace. 1.3 seconds now the gap, so Toprak losing a little bit of time through that final sector. Redding, Ray, Razgatlioglu, you can do it, say Ducati to Scott Redding, and he certainly can at the moment.
Yeah, Scott Redding doing a really good job at the front of the field. Jonathan Ray knows with 6 laps to go, he's got to get through on Scott Redding. We saw him get really close in the run down in towards turn 10 last time around. He'll also know that Toprak's the rider behind him. His pit board will tell him the gap, 1.3 seconds, but we'll see if Toprak's able to pull back another few tenths. Last time around, you can see there, pulled back a quarter of a second on Ray.
And importantly as well, by matching the pace, or beating the pace, as you say, of the riders in front of him, he's left Axel Bassani behind him, so he's shaken off his shadow. Bassani on the number 47, the Moto Corsa rider, still having a great race if he manages to come home in 4th position, but he's now 2.8 seconds back from this race-leading squabble, and he's 1.2 seconds down on Toprak Razgatlioglu, despite the fact that he too is putting in personal best laps at the moment, and his pace is being matched by the likes of Vandermark and Locatelli behind, so things settling down from 4th place backwards, but certainly not for top spot. Might have been 4 tenths at one stage earlier in the lap. It's now back down to just a tenth of a second between Redding and Ray out in front. Nothing to choose between them again. Will Jonathan Ray be able to capitalise on this final sector, where so often he's looked to cut to the inside line? Redding looks to have defended that position well enough. Ray then will go slightly wider into 16, but there's no opportunity through here, so it's all going to be about the 507-metre run in towards turn number 1. We complete lap 15 of 20. Jonathan Ray, knowing he needs to get through on Scott Redding if he's to keep this fight alive, because Toprak Razgatlioglu at the moment is doing it up for 3rd, but Ray is not close enough back into turn 1. Time running out.
Yeah, the yellow flag's out of turn 1 for a crash for Chris Ponson out of this race. He joins Tito Rabat on the sidelines, and also Oliver Koenig after his crash into turn 3. But Jonathan Ray, he knows with 5 laps to go, he is going to get an opportunity. A bit of a slide there for Scott Redding through 4 and 5, and certainly for Ray, he knows that he will get close enough. But into turn 10, he hasn't been fast enough to try and attack Redding. He's going to just have to try and put his bike in a position to get down the inside into turn 10 or turn 15.
Every time I see them bumping over the curb at 5, sliding and struggling for grip, it looks like we're moments away from disaster. It's disaster for Ray as things stand. He must get past Scott Redding here to keep the title fight alive for another race, to take us to a last race decider. And Jonathan Ray is through on Scott Redding. Redding the slightest bit offline into turn 10. Ray has preferred the title line all race, and he uses it masterfully to cut through to lead. Scott Redding, though, will immediately respond. He comes from way back, and he almost hits the back of Jonathan Ray. He misses the racing line altogether and does well to stay on the circuit. It's going to give a second wind here to Toprak Razgatlioglu to try and close in on the second place that he needs to seal the title.
Yeah, the gap between Redding and Razgatlioglu down to half a second now after Scott tried to make that move into turn 12. And look at Jonathan ran over something there on the racetrack.
Yes, I couldn't quite work out whether it was a piece of carbon fibre off Ray's own bike or whether there was some debris already on the circuit. But either way, Jonathan Ray is your new race leader, and suddenly the focus turns to what's going on behind him. Can Scott Redding pick back up the pace quickly enough Toprak has seen blood in the water here. Less than a second covering your top three once again. New personal best lap last time around from Razgatlioglu. Is he got the better tyre wear later on? Has he got enough still to attack for second place and seal up this world title?
Toprak wants to get the title won now. He wants to get through on Scott Redding. He knows he's got a chance to do it. You can see Redding there with that little bit of a slip again on the run through 3 and 4. So clearly that Ducati, that's how he's been trying to attack that section of the track. We'll see if Toprak's close enough to make an attack into turn 10. So last time around, obviously Jonathan Rea was able to make that move really late into turn 10. But we'll see if Toprak's able to try and get close enough now.
These are the three men who've been knocking spots off one another all season long. They're the top three in the championship standings. And in this race, as in the series as a whole, nobody has been able to live with them. 3.5 seconds now. The gap between Razgatlioglu in third and Bassani best of the rest in fourth position. But look how close Toprak now is to the tail of Scott Redding. Could there even be an opportunity by the end of this lap, let alone by the end of this race? Toprak might even be able to go after Jonathan Rea and try and chase him down for a championship win in style. Redding's got just about enough in hand for the moment.
Yeah, and for Redding, he's going to come under attack into turn 15, that long right-hander. And we've seen a lot of moves made into there. Looks like Toprak a little bit too far back at this stage. So into turn 1 for Toprak.
0.8 of a second between Rea and Razgatlioglu. Keep an eye on that gap as Redding leaves the door wide open for Razgatlioglu. He will still have the inside though on the switchback for turn 17. He won't want to mess up the two championship contenders, knowing that he's been commenting on aggressive riding all season long, but he's got back in front of Razgatlioglu, and sweetly and cleanly done. Toprak though will have the momentum back into turn 1 at the start of lap 18. This could be a title winning overtake from Toprak Razgatlioglu. He's back into second place, and if he stays there, even with Jonathan Rea in front of him, he will be world champion.
Yeah, let's see if Scott Redding's got any answer back to Toprak. Obviously enough, he'll want to make sure he's able to make clean moves. He doesn't want to get involved in that championship battle in any way, but he also wants to make sure he can get through on Toprak. If an opportunity presents itself, Scott Redding will try and make a move on Toprak.
Jonathan Rea will surely be informed of the current situation, and as I said previously, at the moment it's all about what the Ducatis can do, because Rea and Razgatlioglu for the moment look settled. A second between them at the head of the field. Still 2.5 laps to go though for Scott Redding to try and find his way back through, and from a neutral's perspective of course, that will give us a last race decider to this 2021 campaign.
Redding's quite good through turn 13 and 14 compared to Toprak. We'll see if he can get close enough to try and get that Ducati alongside the Yamaha on the run into turn 15, try and answer back, but Toprak's trying to do what he can to open that gap to Scott Redding, as it is the gap to Jonathan Rea. It's 1.1 seconds. He's got a couple of tenths of a second in hand on Scott Redding right now, but any mistake from Toprak, Scott Redding will pounce on.
That long braking zone into turn 15 and 16 though doesn't look like being an easy opportunity to pass Toprak Razgatlioglu, and Toprak defends to the inside through 15, so no way past there, and Redding will have only 2 laps now to find his way through into second position.
Yeah, we know that Toprak's not going to be easy to pass on the run into turn 1 or into turn 10, so for Scott Redding he needs to focus on using the strengths of that Ducati, so we need to exit corner strong, get alongside that Yamaha.
Jonathan Rea doing everything he can out in front, controlling this race.
Yeah, Jonathan's done exactly what he could do in this race. He's leading it. He put the pressure on Toprak. As it is, Toprak's answered every question.
Reminder, as things stand, Jonathan Rea with victory would be 25 points behind Toprak Razgatlioglu in the championship standings. He would gain back 5, but that would not be enough. Toprak for race wins in feature-length races, which is the countback if required. In the case of a tie at the end of the season, would win out. He's had the greater number of feature-length race wins. It's been a fair while since Jonathan Rea was racking up feature-length race wins consistently. He's had a little bit of an extra edge today, capitalising on a couple of wayward moments, nervous moments for Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, Toprak's been able to collect himself from those moments. Obviously, that big moment in turn 15, also on the siding lap initially. It has been an action-packed day for Toprak. He's now opened up enough of a gap over Scott Redding. He's got a half a second in hand over the Ducati. He's a lap and a bit away from winning this world championship.
2 laps from the end, and the race is finally beginning to settle down, although you'd have to say Toprak still looks like he's pushing. He's got the gap down to 0.7 of a second. Surely he's not going to risk absolutely everything here. He only needs a second place, but he's gained 4 tenths on Jonathan Rea on this lap so far, and he's still pushing through the final sector.
I'm not going to lie, this is why every neutral loves Toprak. He's got a chance of winning the championship just by sitting in second. He wants to win the race.
This is astonishing. I should be able to believe what I'm seeing by now, shouldn't I? Because Toprak Razgatlioglu is going after the race leader. Scott Redding's informed. Half a second is the gap. New fastest lap of the race from Razgatlioglu, 1:34.288. He's halved the gap to Rea. It's only 6 tenths ahead of this final lap. He's going after the race win, let alone the championship.
And a bit of a moment there through turn 1 as well for Toprak, using all the curb there as well on the exit. So he is pushing on. He wants to win this race. We saw, like you said, Alex, 0.6 of a second taken out of Jonathan Rea last time around. The one thing for Toprak is he also knows he's got that margin of 0.6 over Scott Redding. So at some point in this lap, he might feel that it's a bridge too far to be able to close up on Ray.
I think that point's already come. First sector completed. Razgat Lioglu still 0.7 of a second now behind the race leader. So Jonathan Ray looks set to take a victory in what is the penultimate race of this 2021 campaign. It's going to be a first victory since race 2 of the Portuguese round. Only his second race win over the 3 rounds and a half that we'll have had by the end of this race. But the championship will be decided. Toprak Razgat Lioglu making his way through in towards the final sector. Only needed second place in this race to be confirmed world champion, and that is exactly where he sits. It's been far from a percentages game though from Razgat Lioglu. It's been a race that has seen him backwards and forwards through the order, but it's all been about Jonathan Ray at the head of the field. Ray looking good to take the race victory. 3 corners remaining for Toprak Razgat Lioglu. It's been 6 years for Jonathan Ray, but Ray's reign has come to an end. A new era has begun in World SBK. The 2021 Motul FIM Superbike World Champion is Toprak Razgat Lioglu. Second place was exactly what he needed. Second place is what he secures. Jonathan Ray is the race winner.